Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Tanim Graun, PNG's Q&A series to encourage public dialogue, debate, and engagement on our development challenges and opportunities and how we, as citizens, can help shape our nation's future. My name is Alan Bird, and I'll be your host as we discuss this topic. Beyond the resources boom, can tourism deliver equitable economic development in Papua New Guinea? We will be taking a number of pre-submitted questions from the audience and from those in other parts of the country. We will also be tweeting live from this room. We're very privileged to have with us today Mariana Ellickson. She's the Director of the Office of Tourism, Arts and Culture. Thank you, Mariana. We have Mr. Peter Vincent, who's over to my left. He's the CEO of the PNG Tourism Promotion Authority. Mr. James Enage, he's the CEO of the Kokoda Track Authority. Mr. Andrew Abel, President, Surfing Association of Papua New Guinea. Mr. Matthew Cooper, who's the General Manager of Gateway Hotel. And of course, one of our permanent panelists, and you'll all know him as the very colorful Mr. Martin Namarong, who's an internationally recognized writer and blogger. In PNG, we are blessed to have a country that is so abundant with natural resources, a very rich cultural heritage, and a pleasant climate. With so much to offer, what is being done to encourage tourism growth in Papua New Guinea, and what are the barriers to the industry prospering? I'll start with Mr. Vincent.
Thank you, Alan. I think tourism in the last 10 or 15 years, we've basically moved on in creating an environment conducive for our private sector members. Unfortunately, one of the things that we continue to experience in trying to develop tourism is the lack of support by relevant government agencies to assist us in putting tourism to where it's supposed to be as a developing sector. Can tourism deliver equitable economy? I believe strongly that it can deliver, but it depends entirely on the government to create the right sort of environment to make sure that tourism does deliver beyond the economic development in Papua New Guinea.
Okay, anyone else? Let's talk about the barriers. Matthew, you've been in the industry a while. You have anything to say?
Look, obviously, security is a great issue to potential tourists coming to Papua New Guinea. Media reports don't help it. Things being blown out of proportion here in the media don't help it. And for Papua New Guineans within their communities to understand what tourism is and the benefits tourism can bring to their community and ensuring their community is safe.
Andrew, you've been working in some remote parts of PNG because, I mean, you go where the surf is, and the surf isn't always in the city. What are some of the barriers you face in your sub-sector, if you like?
That's an interesting question because my approach to creating an equitable and sustainable tourism development platform essentially is geared to working and empowering the most important people in the tourism equation, and that is the traditional resource custodians, the gatekeepers of our resource, the different tourism sectors, the niche sectors, be it surfing, diving, fishing, bird watching, culture, etc. And in having said that, over the course of the last 27 years that I've been promoting and developing the surfing and surf tourism industry, I've taken a whole different approach to developing the resource, essentially bottom up, rather than driving it from top down. And hence, the model that I've created has now become the focus of other surfing nations around the world and academics and universities studying our model. And that's essentially different in the sense because of our PNG is not geared for mass tourism. We are an adventure destination, and the way we have to develop tourism in this country is to ensure that we have the horse in front of the cart, whereas many countries around the world have got it back to front. And I say that because they circumvent the most important people in the equation, being the traditional resource custodians. And in Papua New Guinea, if we are to talk about the key word in the theme today being equitable, well, we have to do it in partnership with our traditional resource custodians to ensure that it is equitable and sustainable for current and future generations. So without the traditional resource custodians, there is no tourism in this country.
One of the things, I don't know, for those of you who participate in the industry would reflect on is, I'd like to travel to Wewak and go to Boram and look at the surf and the waves and everything. I'd like to see that, some resort up in Madang and watch the, sunset. But the cost of, say, an airline ticket in this country, it's probably a lot cheaper to travel down to Cairns than it is to Manus. So I wonder how industry participants reflect on the cost and whether that's a factor in tourists coming in or internal local tourists traveling around this country. If panelists can discuss that as well.
We've been involved in promoting tourism throughout the world for Papua New Guinea, and one of the questions we get asked, or three of the questions that we get asked everywhere we go is that, is Papua New Guinea safe? And my answer simply is that there is no place on earth that is safe. You just have to be sensible in where you're going, and Papua New Guinea is no exception. And the other issue, of course, is the cost issue. And the other one is, of course, they don't know much about where Papua New Guinea is and how do you get to Papua New Guinea. Those were the three main questions. But if we continue to isolate our discussions to law and order, we're not going to get anywhere. And I think there's a lot of other barriers that prevents tourism growth. Government support is one. The infrastructure issues are one. And the list goes on and on and on. We are developing a paper that we're developing now that identifies a whole lot of issues that prevents tourism growth. We call it issues paper. We hope to be able to present that issues paper hopefully before the end of the government to the government and say, here are some of the reasons why it's preventing us from tourism growth. It's not a law and order issues. We're not going to get rid of law and order issues. We can try as much as we can to minimize the law and order problems. But there are a lot of other issues that we can all work together in removing those barriers so that it becomes conducive for tourism development in this country. I have just returned from Wewak. I went home on Thursday, came back on the weekend. The FA itself on the Papua New Guinea sector was 790 kina in FAs. But I paid a total of 1,600 kina. About 50% of that is taken up by the tax. And the tax goes directly to the government. This is a greatest barrier in tourism development. When you get a person sitting in Europe making a decision that he wants to go to have a holiday, and he's got all these destinations that he's looking at, and Papua New Guinea being on the list. At the end, he decides because of the cost, he cannot come to Papua New Guinea. He goes somewhere else. The fact is that the fare that any Guinea sector fare out from Singapore, maybe say $1,450. When you have a look at the tax component, it's about 600 euros on tax component. That's a barrier on its own. And if we can identify those issues and take it to the government and say, listen, the economy is now growing. Let's look at ways of removing the tax component, allow a passenger to pay the FA component only. And I think that's a factor that's going to bring the prices down. And and domestic is the same. That's about 600 kina on domestic taxes alone.
Yeah, James?
I'll just make a comment just to support what Peter has actually stated. We also need to take into consideration that there are other tourism destinations that we're competing against internationally within the international market. And it's not tied down to just one particular factor. Like people say there's too many bad news. That's a challenge for us along the Kokoda track too. There's so many things that happen in other tourism destinations. Like for example, in Bali, they openly just published that after every 9 days, one Australian dies in Bali, yet they all go there, Annually, you see the figures of Australian tourists that are migrating to Bali. People die every day. Here in Port Moresby, just once in a while, but we make a big issue out of it. So just supporting what Peter has actually stated, there are lots of issues, and it's an holistic approach that all sectors need to actually contribute to supporting, and most importantly, we need the political will in terms of supporting some of those initiatives so that we can create an environment that is really, really conducive for tourism. If we definitely don't get those support, then we will talk about tourism, we will see other tourism destinations thriving, and we cannot get there, I should say.
Just picking up from what Peter and James have mentioned, from where I sit, because this is a public sector program that you're running, there are policies and legislations that can work against the growth of tourism. Some policies are pretty outdated. That's one. And they're not current, and there is no cohesion in developing industries. For instance, the visa situation, if people are coming in, or passports for people to go out, but also traveling within PNG. So this that's one example. The other is working with communities, the facilitating, working with communities, and because the organic law is such that the national government goes down there and the provincial government goes there, there's a disconnect that can also have some bearing on the development of tourism in this country. Yes, I agree with Peter. If we just hone in on the security issue, we'll never get anywhere. But by the same token, that calls for a multidisciplinary, a multi-sectoral approach to tourism development. And I do agree that one of the things within a 10-year period between 2000 and 2011, the total investment of government into the tourism, arts and culture sector is less than 200 million within a 10-year period. Now is that something that really makes you feel like you're going to invest in this, in the sector? No, it doesn't. It just, is it something that we need to learn and go forward with in terms of which industries are going to be the ones that would underpin the human development of this country. So this is just one, but we need to look at those. The barriers are not only prohibitive to the development of tourism, they're also prohibitive to human development, because the communities, as Andy has highlighted, are benefiting, and they can benefit. It's just that these are some of the things that we just need to get out of the way.
I would like to think that, the policies and regulations and all that we have in government departments should be seen as guidelines. We see them as Bibles, and that's what he says, and that's what we should do. That's going to create a lot of impediments in as far as and I think I'm saying this because we have a very classic example. We started developing the cruise tourism strategy about 2009. In the process, we identified that there was a lot of government departments that were involved in removing some of the impediments. One is, of course, the visa issue. We said to them, listen, the tourists arrive here, and they only be here for about 8 hours. At the end of the day, they're going to disappear. If you charge them the 100 kina visa fee, nobody's going to come off, and we'll lose out completely. With immigration, and we removed the tourism visa fees for all cruise ships. So the passengers arrive, they get off, they spend the whole day wherever they want to go. And we removed that. And we worked with PNG Ports, the same issue. PNG Ports, when they established the pilotage scores, they established the pilotage scores based on container ships. Cruise tourism was never taken into account, and they were charging 50,000 kina per ship. We went to the LDC and said, listen, we want to promote cruise tourism. Can you reduce the rate by about 50%? On the 6th of March, I think. Yeah, 6th of March, they removed reduced the rate by 50%. This is a sort of collaboration that should be taking place within government agency, so that it allows us to go and do a lot of things that we want to do in promoting tourism. At the end of the day, tourism benefits not only the government sectors, but I think our interest, particularly in tourism, is to making sure that our local economies benefits in a greater sense.
Thank you. Good point. Gima Kapi from Nationwide Microbank. Could you ask your question, please?
My question is, tourism is traditionally a labor-intensive industry, and unlike mining, is a renewable resource. With high unemployment rates, do you think a growth in PNG tourism can help reduce poverty by offering jobs to people? And what is being done in terms of providing tourism education and training?
Thank you very much, Gima.
I've been involved in the service industry here in Papua New Guinea for 17 years. Education is such a priority to us with our employment of people. I must say, in the past 17 years, we haven't seen an increase, as one may expect, in the quality of person that we can hire based on an improved education level. On top of that, whilst there are a number of fantastic institutions doing community hospitality level certificate training, which is fantastic, as a service industry, hotels in Port Moresby are out there to offer whatever work experience and job experience that these programs need. From a higher level, there's been no chef training through the TAFE inlay for some years now, so there is a massive shortage there of qualified chefs. And from a more senior level, unfortunately, whilst some Year 12 graduates will go on to study and do their bachelors in hospitality and tourism, once they come out of that university after their 4, 5 or 6 years, they have absolutely no job hands-on experience, which in the hospitality industry is starting from a certain level and working your way up, and that needs to be understood by them.
First of all, I'd just like to concur with CEO Peter Vincent and CEO James and Mariana. But adding on to what Matt's talking about, whilst we've addressed a broad spectrum of impediments, I think the fundamental issue here, and goes back to education, and that is to do with the attitude of our people. If you look at Fiji, they bring in around 100,000 tourists a year. They have a population of around 800,000. Why is it they have 3 times more tourists than Papua New Guinea? When you go to Fiji, they welcome you with a smile. And why is that not happening in PNG? And I think the core of this issue, and it's going to continue to be an impediment to the growth of this country, is the attitude of our people. And it all starts in the home. It starts with the mums and dads. It starts in the church. And then you're talking about schools, right? But the core issue here is the attitude of our people. And the onus and responsibility is vested in the mums and dads at home with educating our young kids before they even go into kindergarten and primary school and high school. If the parents are failing, it doesn't matter what kind of education they achieve at the secondary and tertiary level. If they come out with an attitude that is undermining the development initiatives and programs, we're not going to get anywhere. So the challenge now is to start this training at the home first and foremost. That is, I think, the core of our problem is the attitude of our people.
Alan, I agree that tourism is a labour incentive industry, and I think in where we sit in tourism, we would like to think that tourism can become a major driver in terms of alleviating poverty, in terms of generating income for the local communities, in terms of improving the lifestyles of our local communities in our local areas. But I think the focus right now, either from the government or from the funding agencies that we work with, is focused on improving health and improving education, improving basic infrastructure and all that. And we believe very strongly that if the focus can shift a little bit towards tourism and put a lot of resources into developing tourism, tourism becomes a major driver of those incidents. I think we can, a lot of the health issues that we have, the poverty issues that we have, and a lot of the social issues that we have in the communities can be resolved through empowering the tourism sector, so that the tourism sector can become a major tourism driver or tourism economy driver within the country itself.
Just a quick one. What do you mean by resourcing? How should the government do it?
If you have a look at the government focus right now, is a lot of resources, funding is going to the police department, is going to the health department, is going to the education department. We have no problems with that. But I think if they can focus tourism over the years has been left at the very end of the line. We need to shift that a little bit upwards and say tourism should sit up in the higher brackets of the economic sector. Are you involved in developing the 2050 plan? And if you have a look at that plan, Alan, you'll see that in all the sectors, tourism sits under pillar number 2, which is the very highest sector. But if you look at how much you have written about tourism, there's only 2 paragraphs about tourism. Is that how important tourism is? That's a question I want to ask.
But Peter, you were saying before, in New Zealand, the Prime Minister is the Minister for Tourism. Is that that is the priority of tourism to New Zealand?
In certain countries, including the smaller Pacific Island countries, there is no other sector. It's only the tourism sector. In terms of Fiji, for instance, the Fijian government puts in $50 million for the tourism sector. And for Papua New Guinea, we all say that it's got so much potential, but the government puts in 10 million. And then you convert that, a lot of the things that we do in marketing Papua New Guinea is overseas based. So when you convert that 10 million into US dollars, you see how much we've got to run with. And when you convert that 50 million the Fijian government spends, you can imagine how much they can do with. And I get a lot of questions. People ask me, they said, why didn't you go down and see what Fiji does and be able to learn from it? There's nothing that Fiji is doing that we're not doing here. The only difference that the Fijians are doing better than us is that they've got a lot more resources than we have. They've got 50 million dollars, and we've got $3 million US dollars to be able to go and exactly the same thing that Fiji does in the overseas markets.
So just for our viewers' sake, what, 50 million Fijian dollars is the equivalent of what, 70, 80 million kina?
75 million kina.
75 million kina. We get 10 million,
We get 10
they get 75.
That's
okay.
I'll probably just respond to the question. Within the context of the Kokoda trekking industry, before the industry actually picked up 10 years ago, we had a lot of youths that were unemployed. Most of the Koyeris, all my ethnic group of people, they live in 5-mile settlement, 6-mile settlement, and in the Morata settlement. After the tourism industry picked up along the Kokoda track, most of the youths that are employed are now employed through various tour companies. I'll just give you the insight of how much they actually paid, and then you decide if that's enough money to make a difference in the lives of youths that are actually unemployed. For a general porter, you don't have to have a qualification, meaning that if you are illiterate, you can read and write. They give you a position of general porter, which will earn you 60 kina minimum, which is what you actually earn to be a general porter. And then for guides, they pay them between 1,500 and 1,200.
Is that per fortnight or?
That's for per trek that you actually do. But the wages actually vary from company to company. So they pay them after 10 days, 7 days, 500 kina for 500 to 700 kina for general porters. General porters are ones that actually carry food, and then they give a different rate to the personal porters. For the guides, I've just given you the figure. With the industry, annually we have like casual employment, which boys get engaged with two companies on casual basis. There are around between 500 to 600 employment for unemployed youths within the city. For the villages, they normally charge guest house fees. They sell bilums and other crafts that they make to trekkers that actually walk the Kokoda track. So in terms of income generation, it does make a difference for those people that are along the Kokoda track. At least if it's 0.5%, it's something. And when we talk about equitable economic development, tourism doesn't marginalize, especially for us along the Kokoda track. Despite of who you are, what your status is in the village, as long as you are strong, you are able to actually participate, you can be engaged so that you can have an income and an opportunity. That's the beauty about this particular industry. I totally agree that it's labor intensive, but then people get well paid for it for us along the Kokoda track.
Thank you very much, James. We now go to and we'll come back, as I said, we'll keep discussing these things. Let's go to a video question now from Martin Tony from Simbu Province.
Well, my name is Martin Tony. Presently, I am the Artistic Director for the 5th Malaysian Festival of Arts and Culture. As an artist, what I would like to ask one question is, why can't we get big budget, just like the one we're getting now for the festival? If we continuously get things like this, I mean, when you look at tourism, arts and culture, we have places to see, places to go, people to see, people to talk to. And the diversity we have is not only of people and culture, but it's a place where we live. And going remote, these are kind of things that we need to really nurture. And if anything, we need to understand it better.
Well, why can't we get big budget? We've just been talking about
Alan, can I respond to my namesake's question? I like the question. It's quite interesting. It reminded me of, why can't we have elections every time so the roads get sealed or something like that? As someone who was able to travel to very remote parts of the CIPIC, why can't we have commissions of inquiry every time so that the roads get graded and the inquiry team travels? So I think
actually we'll be having another commission of inquiry soon, so that might
something might get figured out. But yeah, it's always these sort of things, and well, APEC's coming up, so we might get another big budget for something coming up like that. And but beyond that, there's a point that was made earlier by some of our panelists, and that was, now that we have this expansion of tourism, hospitality infrastructure like hotels and all that in Port Moresby, big budget spending on that. Maybe we should have a lot more big budget events as well. So maybe people from government could be encouraged to bring, some sort of ministerial conference for the Pacific or things like that happening here, and he can get his wish all the time with big budget events.
Yeah, true, but they might also want to go to Bali or Manila or someplace like that, more exciting. Yes, Mariana?
That's a very, it's a very good question, but it ties in with the first question that was asked about labor intensive. When we talk about labor intensive in the tourism industry, we're not only talking about porters, we're not only talking about tour guides, we're not talking about those people only. We're talking about other industries that actually help to support the growth, and that's where you get the labor intensiveness. In agriculture, for instance, if you go to the Crown Plaza, you'll be hard-pressed to get a Papua New Guinean meal. You'll be hard-pressed to find tapioca on the menu. You'll be hard-pressed to find taro. Yet this country has a richness in those kind of products. So the investment that is going towards the growth of tourism must also go equally to the industries that support the growth on a sustainable basis, on a regular basis. But what is happening, and just picking up from what Peter is saying, is that you have everybody else getting the big slice of the cake, but there is a disconnect between the results that are coming out, the outputs that are coming out from agriculture. And one of the outputs is the support in fresh food and fresh fruit produce. What about Goilala district? Earmarking that, investing in that area is a large producer for the Port Moresby fresh food and fresh fruit market. You look at other places, perhaps Mule Bay, perhaps Ora province. Those provinces where you still have large tracts of arable land, where landowners, when they know that they're supporting an industry or they're in an industry that's supporting tourism, that's how you get the benefits. They're not always the tourist dollar in your hand, but that industry generates income for you. And so I think sometimes there's a certain narrow-mindedness amongst, within our people, that tourism is when the white man gets off the plane and come and give you kina. That's, so they start to behave like that, Andy's point. But if you see the agriculture industry growing to support not only food security for Papua New Guinea, but also an important industry for tourism that generates income and at the same time generates wealth. So, and you also look at the building industry. Okay, I want to just point towards the question that was asked the artistic director of our festival. Again, labor intensiveness in agriculture, but also in the arts and creative industries in Papua New Guinea. It's underdeveloped, it's untapped. The person that does your t-shirts, graphic artists, can make a lot of money. People looking for banners, you know, musicians, and I'm a musician, you know. You'll be hard-pressed to find studios that are affordable, you know. So we point at cultural infrastructure development, which is lacking, but as someone is saying, like just picking up on what Martin is saying, sometimes something big happens to be the catalyst for the development of something else that ties into tourism. I was quite encouraged last Friday when I was at the National Museum and Art Gallery. They have this beautiful theater. It used to be the amphitheater. The artists are working on it to create a beautiful amphitheater. And I was quite amazed, and I sort of said to myself, if this is what's going to help tourism grow for Papua New Guinea, so be it, because when you have artists being able to have places to perform, whether you're a musician or you're an actor or, you know, whatever. But I think my point is the interrelatedness of various industries, the disconnect still exists, and whether or not it's in the court of government to ensure that that disconnectedness is gotten rid of, or is it up to adults that actually are running these government departments or these industries to actually get off our butts, get together and say what is important for the development of our people. So if we put development, if we put people as the starting point, Andy's point, if you put people in the center of your development planning, you cannot go wrong, because you're going to get, you know, you're going to work through the barriers, and you're going to bring people together.
If we can fund the Melanesian Festival of about 35 million, why can't we fund tourism 35 million? And to me, when I look at a question, is that's a total missed opportunity for tourism. We want to host the Melanesian Festival of Arts in 2010. We should have been preparing in 2010. That allows the Tourism Promotion Authority to take what we are preparing to the overseas markets and start promoting it. The funds only came in, 35 million came in the beginning of the year. I would like to find out exactly how much of that 35 million actually went into preparing it and allowing us to market the event that it's a regional event. That's an opportunity for us to be able to market Papua New Guinea as a regional powerhouse. We've missed that opportunity.
That's a very good point.
We just don't have the ability to take it to the market and start marketing it. And when a tourist sits down in an overseas country and start making a decision to travel, they do not make a decision to travel overnight. They plan well in advance. In Papua New Guinea, it takes about 2 to 3 years to start planning it. And a classic example is at our cultural festival. The Hagen Show, the Koroka Show, the Mas Festival, the Milambai Kundu and Canoe Festival. And they're not prepared well in advance. And exactly the same with the Melanesian Festival of Arts. You may say that it's a huge event, we're creating that environment that Papua New Guinea is now in, but we've missed that boat to start promoting Papua New Guinea not as a tourism destination. I don't want to call it a tourism destination, because Papua New Guinea will never be a mass tourism destination. It will continue to, and our desire is to make sure we place Papua New Guinea to become an adventure destination, and I think that's what we want to be. And we've missed that boat.
If you look back in retrospect, in 1975, Grand Chief Sir Michael ratified an agreement with CRA. And I believe we've been spoilt from day one. We've invested all our resources and time and effort into digging more holes and siphoning more gas, et cetera, et cetera. So we become complacent. We become totally reliant on non-renewable resources instead of diversifying and investing into tourism from day one. If you look at countries like Fiji and Solomons and other smaller nations within the MSG who are not blessed with the kind of resources that we have, they focused on tourism because they know that this is the biggest employer within their countries, and they can create the sustainability and equitability that we talk about. So I think the problem is vested in our leadership, and they become, they lost focus of tourism. It's at the bottom end of the spectrum. And we've got a situation now where, as we mark 39 years of independence, we're blessed with the ExxonMobil LNG project, And all of a sudden, we're waking up to the fact that the potential of tourism for growth and contribution to GDP and employment has been wasted over the last 39 years. So I think this is the problem. We've just been spoilt as a nation, as a people.
Yeah, and you raise a good question. Have we been spoiled?
Andrew is raising the point on LNG project and the mining and the petroleum and the gas companies that we have operating in Papua New Guinea. One of the biggest problems that we have in the tourism sector is that you look at the construction phase of the LNG projects completed. There was a total of 15,000 foreign employees living and working in Papua New Guinea for the last 3 or 4 years. You tell me how many of that 15,000 employees actually took the opportunity to visit any of the Papua New Guinea provinces?
Hardly any, because they weren't allowed to travel.
Because the companies do not allow, they have a very clear restriction on the movement of their employees to visit any parts of Papua New Guinea because they consider it dangerous. If they consider it dangerous, why are they doing business in Papua New Guinea? Why cannot allow the employees to at least visit Papua New Guinea?
And let's have some applause.
That's the real issue. They have over the last 3 years, I believe they have incurred a huge amount of disposable income. After every month when his contract is up, he's got to go down to Cairns, renew his visa for another month, and then come back here. But what about allowing him to go to Medang? What about allowing him to go to Papandeta? What about allowing him to go to Rabaul? We have some of the most beautiful places on earth, and we have these multi-million companies operating in Papua New Guinea, and they still operate, think that Papua New Guinea is still dangerous. If it is dangerous, then go and do business somewhere else.
On that note, and I'll wait for the applause too. And that's a very good point. Now, I want to take you all to the U-Talk segment, and this will just flow on very well from what you've said. The U-Talk segment will put all of this into context. This is actually a short documentary that's done by our Tanim Graun team, and it provides an opportunity for people in the sector to have their say.
Hi, I'm Fidelis Kaugo from West New Britain. I've been with the trekking for some times since 2000 until now. I really thank the Australian Defence to pick out something which is dead, which is not popular at the time, and we bring it up into such something which is today, which the locals are very much benefit out of it. I want to encourage local porters, local operators to get more involved in the activities along the track. This is their place, this is their benefit.
Me Reno Soke, Sogeri, about 30 kilometers drive. You come up Sogeri and Mr. Me want to pota na guide. Sometimes a guide, sometimes a carabeg na din mo sa pota na Mr. About. Mr. Lo 93 na last year tasolem. We got some effects lo. Ose, body blow me feel ose me na blow about. So last year me lusim na we panim really walk on time. Hotel na we walk na. Place where we stop looking at corridor. Ose mipla lohia na kokoda. Okay, benefit em kamia. Me no looking one the big effect lo benefit em kam le area lo mi. Benefit em go namel lo or place stop namel lo kokora trek between Kokora and Sogeri. Benefit em go through this lab. I got all sanapim all new pla house sick. I got kind of some communication or radios all put him lo one place na schools too or building more schools go na. New pla go lo trek eh. Osem some plagi kam na to em good la pay blog so mi pla okra magi mi pla interest lo ko ko trek lo mi pla sim pay lo osem benefit lo gen one day mi pla so about 60 kina so suppose mi pla complete in 9 days osem 10 days mi sa sim round about 600 kina mi bin walk about the adventure kokoda osem pota na plenty of trek leaders lo mi friend want more finish. Tapi plus awak apa tol? Plus lain aussi game or plus kakek belum tahu plus kakek. Or white man aussi game or fruits tahu aussi kakek. So mi lagi mau sem. Iga sampla more fruits belum white man aussi more kan planning belum dislahap yang bau right.
Name belum mi work siwa here mi belum vis logo. I'm close to lo. Ons kona. Mi start lo na April 18 na 2004. Mi kam na mi stop lo 2011 because me kisim legal problem lo collarbone na mi stop. Yeah, first started me work with them South Pacific Tours. Me plus work go na me plus lusim na me plus go back loan plus company or kolima query tours. Me plus been work with them only go na sampla kind 7-8 years finish now. Me plus white man me plus kisim em come. Ex soldier blown Australian emblem Brian Freeman. I've been come started new company. I'm calling my executive excellence Kokoda. So me go inside the work lo. Me first me come up assistant guide. Me been assist lo 3 years na after me come up guide lo this company. Me sa work on disabled na me been kisim triple disabled man. Me pla plenty me pla no go lo train but go come lo tractor sol na me pla sa how lo look at them all white man safety blow. One legally good pla no good me place save. Awesome big pla talk blow me awesome. You me all get a man. No good or good pla you must take part lo one something you me need lo look him lo. So you know good pla but you me look him not half man you me too must take part lo this la. Because Australian na Papua New Guinea you me come up for some brother time war come up. So you me must live for some brother. Custom you me go behind him na finish him. Thank you.
I'm Bemu. I grew up here, Taurama. I come from Pari, but this is where I grew up. The last maybe 5-6 years, we've had kite surfers coming in. Before that, we had the surfers coming in, maybe a good 10 years now. 10 years there's been a surf club now happening on that side, one of the first beach on that side. There's been a lot of changes over the last 10 years now, the last decade I should say. You know, for me as a person living here and from here, I'd rather, instead of selling the land, I would like to make use of it and benefit from it, not just myself, future generations like my children, grandchildren in the future. Like this is the perfect place to start up, you know, being the tourism industry here. There's endless opportunities and ideas for that industry here, right here. I've decided to start this business, a retreat called Pandanus here at Taurama Bay. And it will have a nice big deck where you can sit, relax, and a bar, a cafe, and a couple of bungalows. And it's to benefit myself, my family, and also as a contribution to the tourism industry. I'm excited about my pandanus development, but one of the problems I face here is water supply here. I see that as maybe it's going to affect my business.
I mean, this was really not originally part of our game plan. We were going to go to Guam, we were going to do our sea trials for the sub off the coast in Australia, and then we were going to go straight to Guam. But we had a lot of trouble doing the sea trials in Australia because the Tasman Sea was so rough this time of year. We never got a good weather day. And so our producer, Andrew White, said, look, we're going to come right through, you know, here, essentially between New Britain and New Ireland. And so we realized that it might be an ideal place for us to do our trials, because somewhere around the Raval area, either north of the island or south of the island, we expected to be able to find some kind of a lee from the weather, from the big swells, which at this time of year it turned out that on the south side was perfect at Jackanaut Bay, Waterfall Bay, and that turned out to work beautifully. The second I showed up and we flew out there in the helicopter, this is the first thing we did, is fly down to Jackanaut and see if it was going to be okay for what we needed. And as I was flying over the mountains, the highlands, you know, I said, this is Pandora. Yeah. He actually based the look of the kind of the cloud forest, you know, the way the way the clouds kind of form these kind of streamers over the tops of the hills, and we based it on pictures from here. I mean, I didn't send a team down here or anything. There were plenty of pictures in books, and I just told everybody, make it look like that, because I always figured this was the biggest, baddest rainforest in the world, you know. The Amazon's just flat. Okay. Yeah.
We'll pick up the discussion again to the panel. What do you think of that?
I think just picking up from what was asked about the opportunities for Papua New Guinea and about the resource sector, that was because we're talking about beyond the resource boom. There seem to be similarities between what happens with the resource sector and what's happening with tourism, where you have enclaves of economic opportunity that are disconnected from other parts of the country or other sectors of the economy, such that problems are being created. So for instance, in the resource sector, you have enclaves where there's a lot of wealth, but people miss out on opportunities to sell their cacao or cabbages. And in tourism, we also have similar sort of issues being discussed as well. So perhaps there has to be this much more collective dialogue within all sectors, and to realize the opportunities that exist within all sectors. I mean, a friend of mine said that, you know, what's good for tourism is good for the ordinary people, and I think that's true, because if we're talking about reducing the cost of airplane taxes, you know, I'd be happy with that, so I can travel somewhere within the country at a much cheaper rate. If we're talking about improving of infrastructure like water, so that someone can, you know, set up a bungalow at Taurama Bay, that would be good for the local people within that area as well, who benefit from the water pipeline coming in. So I suppose there hasn't been this holistic thinking about the opportunities that exist beyond the tourism sector.
Again, I guess, Madan, it really boils down to the supply and demand basis. My experience, and I can give you a classic example. I lived and worked in Singapore for about 80 years. And when I was working there, I found that there was a demand for sweet potatoes, cacao. And in the supermarkets, we were only selling the very thin Japanese potatoes, and they were running out very, very fast in the supermarket. So I went and spoke to the supermarket chain in Singapore, and I said, well, what if I introduce Papua New Guinea cow to you? And he said, good, let's try it. So I came up personally and bought 6 cartons of Papua New Guinea cow, took it in. I said, why didn't you try it out? And it went out within days. So he said, I want to pick up 3 or 4 containers. The first couple of weeks it worked and worked perfectly well. But after that we came in and said, can you consistently supply? And nobody would ever consistently supply that sort of a demand. So it really boils down to supply and demand. If you go to Matthew and say, Matthew, can you put a Papua New Guinea menu on for Papua New Guinea? And he's going to start asking you a question. If I put it on, it's going to be at a cost. Now, if I want this, can you consistently supply it to me? And Papua New Guineans have the habit of, they'll do it for a couple of weeks. And he disappears for a couple of weeks. You'll never find him to supply what you want. So it really goes down to the supply and demand factor. And, we can say that, there's all sorts of these Papua New Guinea products lying all over Papua New Guinea. And I do agree, there is. But it really boils down to supply and demand. If there is a demand, can Papua New Guinea really consistently supply and supply on time?
And the quality of what is the quality of what is supplied, and whether it's a cacao or whether it's a tourism experience.
That's right.
And if I could just say on that tourism experience, a lot of this has been focused on adventure tourism, but not everybody is after that adventurous tourism experience. At the moment, the world is seeing in tourism, it is a lot more touchy-feely. It's about visiting an area, and rather than going and buying a pot, sitting down and making that pot with the people and taking home your own pot, painting your own tupper cloth. And I think this is really where PNG can offer these experiences. I think fantastic experiences.
Absolutely.
We saw in the earlier one that, you look at the communities along the Kokoda Track. Kokoda, as a result of the business, the total business on Kokoda Track is about between 20 to 25 million Australian dollars. And about 12% of that remains upon the communities on the Kokoda Track. Now, if you really have a look at the benefits into the communities, 3 years ago we started distributing funds generated from the track fees equitably along all the communities along Kokoda Track, plus the 2 LLGs. And if you take a walk about Kokoda Track, you will see the amount of development taking place along the track. Now, those funds did not come from the government. There's no one single funding from the government into the 2 LLGs so that they can do a lot of those things. That came about purely from the funds that we've generated as a result of the business that we've generated along the Kokoda Track. And a lot of people, they were sharing a lot of experiences, but we did it without any real government tangible support from government. We did it because we had a passion to start promoting Kokoda Track. So,
one thing I wanted to ask you, James, and you're of course, responsible for what happens on the Kokoda Track. And you mentioned the jobs, the porters and everything else, but something interesting you mentioned earlier. Were any of the people up there able to find jobs elsewhere because of the tourists they looked after?
Before I actually answer your question, I'll just add on to what Peter basically said in terms of the industry. He made a mention of the figure in Australian dollars. If you convert that, it's between 55 million to 60 million kina industry. Just one particular product, which is the Kokoda Track. But if you have a closer look at it, it's a lot of tour companies that are actually operating along the Kokoda Track. So they actually have a split of the cake, and some get more, some get less, some get taken by our local tour operators. But most of that actually stays in Australia. Before I come to your question, Peter said only 12% gets in. We conducted an economic value study of the Kokoda Track in 2012 based on the 2011 business year, and we managed to engage Kettering University to do that economic value study. Sampled, did a study out of a sample of 7 companies. I have the copy of the report. It's actually here with me. Be happy to actually give it to our host and those that are actually interested. The distribution of the money out of, or the actual value of the money out of those 7 companies is 15.3 million Aussie dollars. That's just 7 companies. We have like 60 to 70 companies that actually registered as licensed to operators. And out of that 15.3 million Aussie dollars, which is in Australian dollars, when you convert that to PNG Kina, it's different from that. We have 35% of that money is actually retained back in Australia. We have 29% of that gets absorbed in airlines companies like Qantas, Air Niugini that flies between Australia, Cairns to come to Port Moresby. And then we have 24% of that money gets absorbed within the Port Moresby economy, and then only 12% is actually distributed to villages along the Kokoda Track through their participation within spin-off activities and directly participating within the tourism industry. So that's just to add on to Peter's comments. To answer your question, Alan, apart from just being ordinary porters, I made a comment earlier that tourism can actually have an effect or impact on other industries like agriculture, forestry, and other sectors that you might not see the connection in terms of policy, in terms of being an industry. Because the range of people that actually come as tourists vary in terms of their backgrounds from different sectors, and they could be potential investors. So I jokingly always tell people that say we want investors that they should try and make their place more welcoming and invite people to come over, because some people that come in could be potential investors. And it truly works for Kokoda Track. We have the government's seasonal worker scheme that we get Papua New Guineans to go down and work in Australia. We have a lot of those fruit farmers that actually walk the Kokoda Track. So while the rest of the Papua New Guinea are queuing up at the Labour and Industry department to actually feed themselves within the scheme, so they go and participate. All the Koyeri and Orokava boys that are walking along the Kokoda Track have been directly invited by these fruit farmers, and they go directly to stay with them to work. And there's like currently around 20 of them that are down in those farms. So apart from just income and opportunity, there are other aspects of tourism that we don't get to see, and then that's the beauty about it.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go to an audience question now. Priscilla Kare from the PNG Educational Advocacy Network. Could you ask your question?
What protections are in place to ensure the tourism Kina stays in Papua New Guinea and does not end up in the hands of large, dominant and foreign interests as the sector grows and also becomes more commercially attractive?
That's a good question. What's in it for us? I mean, we might be making money for other people. Mariana, you wanna?
Is how to keep the tourist dollar here. It addresses 2 things. One is the human development and community development. If you take the industry and anchor it in communities, make them community-led development. And the reason why I'm saying development and not tourism development is because when you say development, you're taking a holistic view of the development of that growth. And that's how you can anchor the tourism dollar in Papua New Guinea, is getting people involved, participating, knowing what benefits are there for you in a community. And so that the vision of how communities can grow through the development of tourism has to be recognized by policymakers, by politicians. It's okay to go out and hand out the kina and, you know, so you buy this and that and the other and give it to the people. But it is disempowering, not empowering. And one of the great things about the industry and the interrelatedness, if you get, you know, when you give it back to the community, so long as these are communities, like in the case of the surfing community that Andy is involved in, they actually focused on what they actually want. And it's very rare that you have communities coming forward to say, this is what we want. We want this kind of development. And so they own it. They participate in it. It empowers them. It makes them cohesive communities. And therefore, security issues go down because people are owning the development. They are the ones that are dictating it. They are the ones that are leading it. And until you put that industry into the communities, but you can't just go down and tell them you've got to get involved. No, no. They've got to come, just like this girl is saying. They've got to want it. They got to know what to do with it. That's how you can anchor the tourism dollars. And everything comes from a humble beginning. So who knows? Bemo Kidu might one day have a thriving industry just down the track from outside of Port Moresby. And I think that's what we want to see, because, you know, broad-based development, not just the big pillars and the pyramids that come up, but to make it a broad-based development approach to tourism, it will really grow because you're anchoring the roots that are sustainable in themselves. And nobody can take the people of Papua New Guinea outside of Papua New Guinea unless they want to go out. But the people that stay here that are involved in an industry where it's creating an income, you know, for them, and it's creating wealth for them, and they know what to do with it. They know the downfalls, the pitfalls of tourism, but they also understand the benefits when you have that sort of thing. So I think it's really, I mean, I would just sort of in a nutshell saying, involve the community.
When you look at PNG, 97% of the land, less the SABL deductions, including up to the fringing reefs, up to 3 nautical mile of our fringing reefs, that belongs to the traditional resource custodians. And the way we will anchor tourism is to ensure, through the empowerment process, to include every facet of the promotion, development, management of the respective resources, be it surfing, diving, fishing, bird watching, etc. The gatekeepers of the resource, the owners of the resource are factored into all facets of the promotion and development of the resource. And I think this is the fundamental problem. And at the end of the day, when you look at the drivers of these respective resources, it boils down to the individuals who are driving the development of that particular resource, and the onus is upon those respective industry leaders to ensure that they respect the dreams and aspirations of the traditional resource custodians. We've got a very complex land tenure system in this country. It's very unique, like any other country in the world. And I say this because I've been doing this for 27 years now in the development of surfing and surf tourism, working in partnership with the traditional resource custodians all around Papua New Guinea, regardless whether it be a matrilineal or patrilineal society. And many years ago, I was criticized for doing this because the people that were sitting on my board couldn't see the future. Well, looking back in hindsight now, Papua New Guinea leads the world. And we've got a cutting-edge approach, which is now the focus of academics and universities. And we have put the horse in front of the cart, and the horse is our people, the custodians. And that is how we will anchor and develop tourism in this country. And if we don't do it, it will not be equitable, and it will not be sustainable. It'll end up going pear-shaped, like what is happening right now in the surfing nations in Mentawais and the Indonesian archipelago, where the traditional resource custodians are now rejecting the way that they've been deprived and circumvented in participating in all facets of the development of the surfing resource, but that can be also duplicated in every other niche sector in this country.
We're running out of time, so I'll go to the last question, and that'll be directed at you, Mr. Vincent. As a sustainable renewable resource, what incentives, and it's again drawing on from what Andrew and Mariana just said, we know we have an SME policy coming up. What sort of incentives do we have for potential Papua New Guinean tourist operators?
Well,
How can you help them?
Let me just make a few comments on the question that was raised. I think we're living in a global economy. There will be certain elements that will be focused on foreign investment. If we didn't, there's no way we can encourage brand names, maybe the Marriotts, the Hiltons and all that into Papua New Guinea. So there's got to be some opportunities available. But again, maybe going back to the investment, the government needs to identify clearly what is restricted to local investors and what is open for foreign investment. In terms of investment, I think, if you have a look at the mining and the petroleum sector, they get a grace period of 20 years, depending on the size of investment. You look at, and then they say for the tourism sector, they say that that's exactly the same that the mining sector gets. If you want to look at a hotel investment or a resort or a tour operations or anything, that's exactly the same sort of incentives that you get. I think to me that is a joke. It should be at different levels. A tourism sector that has to be very specific. It should be focused on different levels of investment.
But are there any incentives right now, as it is?
There are, but there are very limited incentives. And it's not targeted at tourism investment. It's targeted at the whole economy. So we are devising a range of incentives, and based with the issues paper that we're developing, identifying clearly what are the sort of incentives that should be applying across the board for the tourism sector.
Thank you very much. Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. I hope you have enjoyed this Tanim Graun Beyond the Resources Boom. Can tourism deliver equitable economic development in PNG? Please join me in thanking our panel members for today. We have Mariana Elixon from she's the Director of Office of Tourism, Arts and Culture. Mr. Peter Vincent, who's the CEO of the TPA, Tourism Promotion Authority. Mr. James Enage, CEO, Kokoda Track Authority. Mr. Andrew Abel, President of the Surfing Association of Papua New Guinea. Mr. Matthew Cooper. Thank you, Matthew. General Manager of the Gateway Hotel. And of course, Martin Namarong. My name is Alan Bird, and thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you all next time. And remember, Tok Tok, belong you by Tanim Graun.